What the hell is this ghetto nonsense? The words cut through the polished silence of Manhattan's most elite steakhouse like a cleaver through bone. Every head in the kitchen snapped toward the source. Ethan Carrington, billionaire CEO of Carrington Resorts, stood frozen in designer perfection, rage crackling from his 6'2" frame. His eyes, sharp and silver, locked onto a sight that shattered his immaculate perception of order. Naomi Bennett didn't flinch. She was used to stares, used to assumptions. But this time, it was more than a look. This time, her job, her child, her dignity, everything was on the line. Her 8-month-old daughter, Leah, was tied securely against her back in a colorful African wrap. Naomi had just finished taking a table's order and returned to the back line to prep a tray. The baby nestled peacefully, eyes half closed, fingers playing with the folds of fabric. To Naomi, this was survival. A tradition. A blessing passed down through generations of black women. But to Ethan? This is a professional establishment, not some street market, he spat. You're fired. Just like that. No discussion. No empathy. Just disgust. And power. The kind of power that has never had to understand the difference between tradition and threat. In that moment, the kitchen, once filled with sizzle and clatter, went still. Naomi stood tall, not because she wasn't breaking inside, but because centuries of resilience flowed through her. This wasn't just her story. It was a black story. And it wasn't over. This is the moment everything changed. For Naomi. For Ethan. For everyone watching. If you believe in dignity over prejudice, if you believe love and legacy matter more than power and protocol, then stay with me. Because what happens next is going to challenge everything you think you know about what's civilized. Oh, and if this story already has you thinking, do me a favor. Tap like. Subscribe. Let's keep stories like this alive. Now, breathe in deep. Because the storm is just beginning. 3 years earlier, the Bronx didn't just look different, it sounded different. It smelled like summer heat rising off cracked sidewalks, and it pulsed with sirens, laughter, and the distant hum of subway trains. In a walk-up apartment above a laundromat, Naomi Bennett sat at the edge of a twin mattress, one hand on her swollen belly, the other gripping a letter that had just shattered her plans. The envelope was thin, official, and brutal. A notice of academic suspension from the City University of New York. Too many missed classes. Too many clinicals skipped. Naomi had been studying to become a nurse, with top marks and a full scholarship. But life had its own curriculum. Her mother had passed away 6 months into the program. Colon cancer caught too late, treated even later. Naomi had been the one to bathe her, feed her, carry her up the stairs when she no longer had the strength to stand. She had also been the one to bury her. Alone. Then came Caleb. He had warm eyes and fast words. He promised help, love, even marriage. Naomi believed him. At least until he disappeared 3 months into her pregnancy, leaving behind nothing but lies and unpaid rent. Naomi didn't fall apart. She simply adjusted. She gave up textbooks for tip trays, lectures for late-night shifts. She got a job waiting tables at a midtown bistro where no one asked about her past, and no one cared about her future, as long as she smiled and wore black. And when baby Leah arrived, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and lungs that filled a room, Naomi didn't panic. She did what the women in her family had always done. She wrapped her daughter close, pressed her to her chest, and whispered promises through tears. You will never feel alone. You will never feel unwanted. I got you. Every morning, Naomi kissed her baby's forehead, tied up her curls, and caught the 5:42 a.m. D train into Manhattan. She left the softness of motherhood behind and stepped into a world that measured worth by appearance, pedigree, and punctuality. But Naomi carried something that couldn't be measured: resolve. A quiet kind. The kind that gets up when nobody's watching. And on the day Ethan Carrington fired her in front of a full kitchen, that same resolve kept her standing. Because Naomi Bennett knew one thing for sure. She was not raised to back down. It was a Friday night in late October. The kind of evening when the city glowed with energy, streetlights reflecting off rain-soaked sidewalks, taxis blurring past with impatient horns, and the restaurant buzz reaching its usual fever pitch. Naomi was halfway through a double shift, her black apron already stained from a spilled Syrah and the remnants of a creme brulee disaster. Her feet ached. Her back screamed. But her smile? Still intact. That was part of the job, especially at Lucien's, the upscale French fusion spot tucked between Park and Madison, where celebrities and CEOs came to forget the outside world and indulge in foie gras without judgment. The staff had one unspoken rule: no personal stories, no slip-ups, no mistakes. Which made what happened next all the more catastrophic. Ethan Carrington didn't announce himself when he entered the restaurant. He didn't need to. People made space for him. At 6'2", tailored in navy Tom Ford, he walked like someone who'd never waited in line, never heard the word no, and never needed to explain why he belonged. The maitre d' nearly tripped over himself getting Ethan to the private table by the window. Naomi didn't recognize him at first. To her, he was just another powerful man with tired eyes and a Rolex. She approached with the menu, confident and calm, until the glass tipped. A clumsy busser brushing past. A half-full glass of Bordeaux tipping sideways. And suddenly, rich red wine soaking into the left sleeve of a $10,000 blazer. The silence that followed was sharp. Ethan stood slowly, like a man unaccustomed to disorder. His voice, when it came, was cold steel. "Do you have any idea what this costs?" Naomi blinked. "I'm so sorry, sir. Let me get towels." He cut her off. "Towels? What I need is competence." The maitre d' rushed in with apologies, offering wine on the house, a meal on the house, a future on the house, anything to smooth over the disruption. Naomi stood frozen, heart pounding in her ears. "I'll pay for the cleaning," she said quietly. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You couldn't afford the hanger it was stored on." He sat back down, dismissing her like an app he was done using. And Naomi, cheeks burning, returned to the kitchen, but not broken. Because what he didn't know was this: that wasn't the first time someone underestimated her. And it wouldn't be the last time she proved someone wrong. 3 weeks after the spilled wine incident, Naomi was still working at Lucien's. Barely. Management had reduced her shifts, subtly moving her off high-profile tables and onto weekday lunches, where tips were lighter and the scrutiny just as heavy. But she didn't complain. Every dollar counted, and Leah still needed formula, diapers, and a warm place to sleep. It was a Wednesday when the breaking point came. Naomi was just getting ready to leave for work when her neighbor, Miss Clara, the retired teacher who had been watching Leah for $10 a day, called with a scratchy voice and worse news. "I'm so sorry, baby," she said between coughs. "I've got a fever and the chills. I can't keep the baby today." Naomi's heart sank. She looked down at Leah, still in her footy pajamas, smiling up at her from the crib. The clock read 10:12 a.m. Her shift started in 48 minutes. She called every name in her contacts. No one could help. Her cousin was working, her classmate was out of town, and daycare? Impossible without 72 hours notice and a 6-month wait list. For 5 full minutes, Naomi stood in the center of her tiny apartment, her coat half on, eyes darting between the clock and the crib. And then, she made a decision. She pulled the vibrant fabric from the top shelf of her closet. The African wrap, passed down from her grandmother to her mother to her. Deep blue with golden swirls and symbols worn soft from years of use. It still smelled faintly like cocoa butter and lavender oil. With practiced ease, Naomi folded the wrap, slipped Leah into position, and tied the knots just the way her mother had taught her. Over the shoulders, under the arms, across the waist. Secure. Safe. "You're coming with Mama today," she whispered, kissing her daughter's cheek. The train ride was a blur. Naomi wore a long black trench coat over the wrap, keeping Leah hidden as best she could. The baby gurgled quietly, occasionally peeking up at the world with wide, trusting eyes. No one noticed, until the kitchen. Naomi had made it nearly 2 hours into her shift without incident. She kept moving, serving drinks, wiping tables, whispering lullabies between steps. Leah stayed asleep, lulled by the rhythm of her mother's movement and the warmth of her skin. Until a door swung open. Until Ethan Carrington walked in. Until everything exploded. Naomi didn't hear him come in. She was too focused, too careful, balancing a tray of sparkling water and lemon wedges while her daughter dozed silently against her back. The wrap held Leah close, her little cheek pressed against Naomi's spine, tiny fingers curled into the folds of fabric that had once cradled generations. The kitchen was hot, loud, alive with orders and shouts. Naomi moved with grace through it all, steady, invisible, efficient, until the shouting stopped. "What the hell is this ghetto nonsense?" The words dropped like a hammer. The room froze. Pans stopped clattering. Even the head chef looked up from his plating, wide-eyed. Naomi turned slowly, her body stiff, her breath caught in her throat. Ethan Carrington stood in the doorway, his expression twisted with something between disgust and disbelief. His eyes locked on the wrap, on the baby resting there, and hardened. "I asked a question," he said, stepping forward. "Is this a daycare now? Is that what we're doing here?" Naomi tried to explain. "Sir, I had no choice. My sitter." "You brought a child into a restaurant kitchen," he interrupted, his voice rising. "Do you understand the liability? The optics?" "I kept her quiet. She's safe. This wrap," he scoffed. "This wrap looks like you're smuggling something. This is a professional environment, not some third-world market." The words hit Naomi like open palms. Around her, no one moved. No one spoke. "You're fired," Ethan said flatly. "Leave. Now." Naomi opened her mouth, then closed it. There were no words that would matter. No explanation that would soften the edges of his prejudice. With trembling hands, she untied the wrap, cradling Leah close as the baby stirred, sensing the tension in the air. Naomi walked past the line cooks, past the sous chef who couldn't meet her eyes, past the manager pretending to read a clipboard. She didn't cry. Not then. But later, in the quiet of her apartment, after Leah had finally fallen asleep, Naomi sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wrap in her hands. Her grandmother's wrap. Her mother's legacy. Her own lifeline. She folded it carefully, reverently, and placed it in the back of the closet. Then she sat in the dark. And finally, the tears came. The world didn't stop for Naomi Bennett. Bills still came. Leah still needed to be fed, changed, held through the night. The refrigerator buzzed quietly, the ceiling leaked when it rained, and life moved on in the way it always does when you're broke and invisible. But someone had seen what happened. Marco Rossi had been working behind the line that day, slicing truffle mushrooms with the same tired rhythm he used every lunch shift. Marco wasn't much for drama. He came in, did his job, collected his check, and kept his head down. But that afternoon, something didn't sit right. He'd seen the way Naomi moved through the kitchen, steady, kind, never loud, never late. He'd seen the baby in the wrap before, too, on a slower day, when Naomi had stayed to help clean after hours. He hadn't said anything because, well, the baby wasn't a problem. She slept. She smiled. And Naomi? She worked twice as hard as the rest of them. So when Ethan Carrington stormed in and tore her down like she was trash, called her ghetto, primitive, and worse, Marco's got twisted. He'd had his phone in his back pocket. Pure habit. And something about the sound of Ethan's voice had made him hit record. Just for a few seconds. Maybe 30. Enough to catch the CEO of a luxury resort chain humiliating a young black mother trying to hold her life together with threadbare dignity. Marco didn't mean to start anything. But that night, he went home, poured a glass of whiskey, and replayed the video again and again. He didn't sleep. By morning, he had created a burner TikTok account under the name @TruthServidCold and uploaded the clip with no caption. No hashtags. Just raw footage. Within 6 hours, the video had over 200,000 views. By evening, it had hit 1 million. And by the next morning, the internet had a new name trending: Naomi Bennett. They didn't know her full story yet. But they had seen enough. The man in the $1,000 suit yelling at the woman in a black apron. The baby wrapped in beauty and safety being called dangerous. The line had been crossed. And someone had finally hit record. By Friday morning, Naomi's name was everywhere. The video had gone viral across TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. News anchors were using words like racist outburst, cultural ignorance, and modern-day shaming. Clips of Ethan Carrington's voice, cold and biting, were now stitched next to reactions from mothers, activists, and even pediatricians. "This rap," he had said in the video, his tone dripping with disdain. "This isn't a professional environment, it's a third-world market." That line alone launched 1,000 hashtags. Hashtag wrapped in love. Hashtag let Naomi speak. Hashtag Black Mothers Matter. People who had never heard of Naomi Bennett suddenly cared deeply about her story. Artists drew illustrations of a mother wearing her baby with pride. Poets wrote odes to ancestral wisdom. Child psychologists chimed in with research proving the emotional and developmental benefits of baby wearing, especially for infants dealing with separation or trauma. Major parenting blogs called out Carrington's behavior. Several restaurants issued public statements supporting their staff's right to parenting accommodations. Even celebrities started weighing in. A Grammy-winning singer tweeted, "Naomi Bennett is all of us. Black, broke, brilliant, and still standing." Meanwhile, Naomi remained quiet. She hadn't posted anything. She hadn't even watched the video. Her prepaid phone rang non-stop: reporters, influencers, strangers. She ignored them all. She wasn't interested in going viral. She just needed diapers and a job. But the world wouldn't let her disappear. That night, a local radio host from Harlem reached out through a friend of a friend. They weren't a big show. No cameras. Just a conversation. Naomi hesitated, then agreed. In a soft voice over airwaves crackling with static, she spoke. "I didn't bring my baby to work because I wanted to. I brought her because I had to. The rap you saw? It's part of my heritage. My grandmother carried me that way. Her mother carried her. It's how we stay connected when we have nothing else." She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just told the truth. And the truth moved people. A GoFundMe launched overnight. In 24 hours, it raised over $50,000. And across the city, behind glass towers and locked office doors, one man watched it all unfold with growing discomfort. Ethan Carrington was trending. But not for the reasons he liked. He showed up at the library on a gray Tuesday afternoon, dressed in a dark wool coat and discomfort. Ethan Carrington had never been inside a public library. Not really. Maybe as a kid on a school field trip. But certainly not like this, uninvited, out of place, and unsure. He spotted her in the children's section, sitting cross-legged on a colorful rug, reading aloud from a board book. Leah sat in her lap, wide-eyed and content, one tiny hand resting against her mother's chest. Naomi looked up. Their eyes met. And for a moment, nothing moved. No press. No cameras. Just two people on opposite sides of a moment that had split the internet wide open. "I didn't know where else to go," Ethan said. Naomi didn't answer right away. She closed the book gently, lifted Leah, and stood. Her posture was calm but firm, like someone who had nothing left to prove. "I just want to talk," he added. Naomi gestured toward a bench by the window. He followed, awkward in the space, unsure of how to sit when his reputation was unraveling outside those walls. "I came to say I'm sorry," Ethan began, his voice low. "For calling me ghetto? Or for firing me because I carried my daughter like my mother carried me?" He winced. "For all of it. I was wrong. I acted out of ignorance and pride. And I see that now." Naomi studied him. He looked tired. Not just from media fallout, but from something deeper. A man who had built empires but never learned how to listen. I don't want to just apologize, he continued. I want to make this right. I can offer you your job back, with a raise. Benefits. Child care. I don't need your charity, Naomi said, not unkindly. I need you to understand. He nodded, slowly. Teach me, then. Naomi sighed, looked down at Leah, then back at him. You're a powerful man, Mr. Carrington. But power without empathy is just fear in a tailored suit. Ethan didn't reply. Not because he didn't have words, but because, for the first time in a long time, he realized silence might teach him more than speaking ever could. Outside, the city moved as it always had. Inside, something had shifted. And for Ethan Carrington, it was just the beginning. The first time Ethan walked into the community parenting center in Harlem, he was sure he didn't belong. The building was old, the walls painted a cheerful but fading yellow. The waiting room smelled faintly of baby powder and coffee. Flyers for diaper drives and parenting workshops lined the bulletin board. No marble floors. No valet parking. Just strollers, folded jackets, and tired parents trying their best. He had called ahead, using only his first name. I'm Ethan, he had said. I'd like to attend a class. First-time parenting, or whatever you recommend. The receptionist, a woman with braids and glasses that slipped down her nose, had looked at him over the counter with amused suspicion, but she handed him a clipboard and said, "Welcome. Everyone starts somewhere." And that's how it began. No cameras. No PR team. Just Ethan Carrington, billionaire, CEO, and now, student. He sat in plastic chairs next to exhausted moms, teen dads, and grandparents raising grandkids. He listened more than he spoke. He learned about infant bonding, co-regulation, the power of skin-to-skin contact. He watched videos about traditional baby wearing from cultures around the world. Africa, Asia, indigenous communities in North and South America. The same things Naomi had tried to explain. At first, he resisted. He had always believed in research, protocols, systems. But slowly, he began to understand that love wasn't a system, it was rhythm, presence, stillness. During one session, the instructor, a pediatric nurse named Carla with 20 years in the trenches, played a documentary about postpartum healing in Senegal. Mothers danced with their babies strapped to their backs, singing lullabies passed down for generations. The room was quiet when it ended. Carla turned to Ethan. "Mr. C," she said. "What did you think?" He swallowed hard. "I thought I had the best answers. But I've only ever asked the questions that made sense to me." Carla nodded. That's how change starts. Later that night, back at his penthouse with the lights dimmed and his phone on silent, Ethan pulled out a notepad. He wrote one sentence over and over. What else have I ignored because it didn't look like me? He wasn't sure if he was trying to be a better man. But he knew he was trying to be a better father. And that was a start. The stage wasn't big. Just a black floor, a spotlight, and a crowd that waited in quiet expectation. Naomi stood behind the curtain, one hand resting on the wrap tied neatly around her waist. She wasn't carrying Leah that day, but the fabric was there. Always there. A symbol. A memory. A promise. It had been 3 months since the video. Since the firestorm. Since she became the woman in the clip, the waitress with the baby on her back and dignity in her spine. In the beginning, she had refused every interview, every speaking request, every media offer. But then came the invitation from TEDx Brooklyn. Not for drama, not for exposure, but for wisdom. Naomi had nearly said no. But something in the email stopped her. A line at the bottom, "We believe your voice carries something deeper than outrage. We believe it carries truth." And so she stood there now, her palms damp, her heart steady. The host introduced her simply. "Please welcome Naomi Bennett, mother, advocate, and reminder of what we forget." Applause. Then silence. Naomi stepped into the light. She didn't look like a celebrity. No stylist. No designer heels. Just a clean blouse, dark jeans, and the fabric tied neatly at her hip. She began with a story. Where I come from, we don't just carry babies. We carry legacy. My grandmother carried my mother in this wrap. My mother carried me. And one day, I carried my daughter. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. She told the audience about Lucien's, about the kitchen, about the man in the suit. But she didn't dwell on anger. She spoke of assumptions, of how we decide what's professional and what's primitive, of how a wrap of cloth could scare a man more than a spreadsheet full of facts. Civilization isn't how much money you make, she said. It's how well you love. The crowd was silent when she finished. Then they stood. All of them. Even in the back, where a man in a simple gray suit stood with his hands in his pockets, eyes wet with something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Ethan didn't clap to be seen. He clapped because he meant it. Naomi hadn't just spoken her truth. She had spoken his, too. 6 months later, Naomi stood in a different kind of spotlight. But this time, it wasn't on a stage. It was sunlight filtering through tall windows inside a newly renovated community center on the Lower East Side. The building had once been a forgotten library, abandoned for years. Now, it bore a new name on its glass doors. The Bennett Carrington Center for Cultural Parenting and Early Development. Inside, walls were painted in warm earth tones. Shelves held books in multiple languages. Art from West African, Latin American, and indigenous traditions adorned the halls. And in one sunlit corner, a baby-wearing circle had gathered, young mothers and fathers learning the ancient rhythm of bonding that had once been called primitive. Naomi didn't work at a restaurant anymore. She ran the center. With her. With Ethan. It hadn't happened overnight. Healing never does. But after the speech, after the apologies, after the hard conversations, something had shifted between them. They didn't force it. They let it grow. Slowly. Like trust. Like a child learning to walk. Ethan stepped away from the CEO role. Temporarily, he said. Permanently, it turned out. He realized that leading a company was easy. Leading himself? That took real work. He helped fund the center. Quietly. Without fanfare. Not because he owed Naomi, but because he believed in her. And when the board offered Naomi a position as director, she accepted, but only on one condition. The center had to be built with authenticity, not optics. It had to serve everyone, especially the unseen. So they built it. Together. Leah, now walking and babbling in 2 languages, became the unofficial mascot. She greeted visitors with gummy smiles and tiny waves. Her laughter echoed in rooms where silence used to live. Marco Rossi, the line cook who started it all, was now head of culinary education at the center, teaching young parents how to make affordable, healthy meals for growing kids. He still refused to be called a hero. I just pressed record, he'd say. She did the rest. People came from all over the country to visit the center, to learn, to listen, to unlearn. One day, a woman stopped Naomi in the hallway and asked how she had built all this from a viral video. Naomi smiled. I didn't build it from a video, she said. I built it from a rap. Then she walked away, Leah on her back. Because that's how legacies travel. If this story teaches us anything, it's that dignity doesn't always wear a suit and tie. Sometimes, it wears an apron. Or a baby on its back. Naomi Bennett didn't change the world because she had power. She changed it because she refused to let someone else define what her love looked like. And Ethan Carrington? A man raised in a world that worshipped data, strategy, and control. He learned that real leadership starts with humility. That sometimes the best thing you can do with your privilege is unlearn what you were taught and listen to those you once overlooked. This wasn't just about a restaurant. It wasn't just about a baby wrap. It was about how quickly we decide who belongs and who doesn't. About how often we confuse professionalism with proximity to whiteness. About how many of us need to be reminded that culture isn't chaos. That tradition isn't backwards. That love, real, rooted, generational love, is not something to be apologized for. So if you've ever felt unseen in a room that demanded your silence, if you've ever had to fight for the right to parent your child your way, if you've ever carried a legacy others tried to call a burden, this story is for you. And if you're still here, listening all the way through, that says something. It says you're open. It says you care. So here's what you can do. Share this story. Let it ripple. And if you want more stories like this, black stories, brave stories, healing stories, go ahead and hit like. Subscribe. Join this growing circle of people who believe dignity doesn't need permission. Because love isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's tied gently around your body, held close, and passed on.